Avatars have some of the longest lifespans in the series. Kyoshi lived until 230 years old, Korra is probably going to live until 200 years old, and Yang Chan also lived for well over 100 years. Aang is no different and technically also had a very long life, and that's what we're going to be talking about today because I don't think people really know much about Aang's life, especially after the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender and really after the events of the comics. So here is Aang's life, from being born to the 100-year-long war, to his teenage and adult life, all the way down to his death. Aang was born in 12 BG at the Southern Air Temple. He was shortly taken away by the monks after perfectly selecting the Avatar relics from among thousands of toys. As a young boy and air nomad, Aang traveled around the world. During this time, he was under the guidance of Monk Gyatso. At the age of 4, Aang was taken to the Eastern Air Temple where he chose his flying bison and his best friend, Appa. By the time Aang was 6 years old, he was already excelling at airbending, being a better bender than kids twice his age. At the age of 10 years old, Aang was proven to be a better bender than many of his teachers. 2 years after that, Aang had invented his own airbending technique and was declared an airbending master, earning his tattoos, making him the youngest airbending master in history at that time. And during this year, Aang would visit many different nations, and even making his iconic friends Bumi and Kuzan. He would go on many different adventures with these friends. One of the most iconic adventures he went on with Kuzan was when he saved a dragon from poachers. So far, Aang is just barely a 12-year-old child, and he's already become the youngest airbending master. He's already traveled the world and has made friends all around the world, and this is only the beginning. Soon after this, Aang's childhood would be cut short, 4 years earlier than expected. There is an imminent war approaching, and Aang had to be told he was the Avatar before he was ready. He was told he was the Avatar at just 12 years old. Now, because Aang was declared the Avatar, he was no longer welcome to play with his friends anymore. They felt he had an unfair advantage over them. Instead of being a kid, Aang would now spend all of his time with his teacher, Monk Gyatso. Monk Gyatso was really the only person who understood Aang and what he was going through. This was probably because he was really great friends with the Avatar before Aang. Monk Gyatso tried to ease Aang into adulthood by mixing fun games along with Avatar training. Now, the other monks didn't like how they were having too much fun, and they ordered Aang to be sent to the Eastern Air Temple to get away from Monk Gyatso and to complete his training there. Aang was afraid, he was confused, he didn't really know why the elder monks were doing this to him. He had lost his childhood, he lost his friends, and now he's losing his teacher. With all of these emotions going through his head, Aang decides to run away with Appa before they could send him off, but he gets caught in a storm, almost dying, but the Avatar state saves his life and encapsulates him in an iceberg. During this time, the war begins, and the Fire Nation wipes out every single air nomad, and they begin their war on the entire world. 100 years later, Aang would be found in the iceberg and woken up by Katara and Sokka. He would then learn about the war and would have no choice but to fully accept his duties as the Avatar. After this, Aang would travel the world, meeting and recruiting various masters to Team Avatar. He would make tons of mistakes along the way, and learning how to deal with the balance of being an air nomad and the Avatar, all while being hunted by some of the most fierce villains in the verse. Eventually, Aang would defeat the Fire Nation and Fire Lord Ozai, while still staying true to his air nomad ways. At the age of 13, his team had split up. Aang would now devote his time to restoring peace in the world. He would restore many of the cities that the Fire Nation took from the Earth Kingdom, except for one. The new Fire Lord Zuko drew a line at the city called Yudao. The people in the city didn't want to be separated. They all grew up together and enjoyed living together. Zuko saw this and wouldn't let Aang repatriate the city. This had almost caused a war, but eventually, mostly due to Katara comparing the city to their relationship, Aang would let the city stay as is, and they would enter a new era. An era where the four nations didn't have to stay apart. During this time, Aang would convert a fan club into the Air Acolytes. This would be a way for the fan club to learn about air nomad culture and subsequently preserving air nomad culture as well. Aang would also play a crucial role in helping Zuko find his mother and taking her back to the Fire Nation capital. By the end of the current comic run, Aang is 16 years old and has accomplished many feats as the Avatar and had become a seasoned veteran at this point. Aang is now an adult, and this is what actually interests me the most, and we surprisingly have a lot to go off of here. By this time, Aang had completed his goal of making the world peaceful, and together with his friend Fire Lord Zuko, together they would transform all of the old Fire Nation colonies into the United Republic nations. Zuko and Aang would then create Republic City, which would be the state's capital and home to all nations. In Aang's mid to late 20s, he would start restoration on all 4 air temples, and even making a 5th air temple outside of Republic City called Air Temple Island. He would live in Air Temple Island, but that's not all he did here. He would herd surviving flying bison, along with a new type of lemur that he found after the war. After this, Aang would settle down and marry Katara. They would go on to have 3 children: Bumi, a non-bender; Kaya, a waterbender; and Tenzin, an airbender. Due to Aang's main goal of restoring the Air Nation, he would favor Tenzin a lot, taking him around the world, teaching him all about air nomad philosophies and the way of living. This would cause a multitude of family problems, leading to his other children at times feeling neglected, and this is why most people call Aang a bad father. When Aang was in his 40s, Republic City was suffering a high crime rate due to a mafia-type boss, Yakone. Yakone was a master bloodbender who eluded jail time by being able to bloodbend with his mind. Without the burden of proof, they couldn't keep him in jail. Eventually, Sokka would crack the case, and Yakone would attempt to make his great escape. However, Aang was able to catch him, defeat him, and take away his bending forever. When Aang was in his 50s, Air Temple Island would be griefed. Tenzin saw this, chased down the griefers, and attacked them, causing all 3 of them to be detained by the police. Aang would show up and get them all out of detainment, and these kids were scared to death. They thought Aang was gonna take away their bending, or be super mad at them, but Aang really wasn't mad at anybody, not even Tenzin for attacking them. Aang takes all 3 of them back to Air Temple Island to teach them a lesson in air nomad philosophy, and at the very end, they would all work together to cleanse the air, signaling peace amongst them. Here is Aang at technically 166 years old, making him one of the oldest known avatars ever. The creators actually did tell us some details about the end of Aang's life, and Rising Fist adapted those details into a comic book. All credit goes to him, so please check him out. The link will be in the description down below, but here's a summary. Aang is sensing something is wrong with him, but no one can help him. He's gone to all the best healers in the world, but nothing is working. So he goes to the only person who just might have the wisdom he needs, Avatar Roku. Aang tells Roku that his bending and spiritual connection has weakened, and he doesn't know what's happening. Roku tells him that the 100 years he spent in the iceberg took a toll on his body. The Avatar state kept him alive for 100 years, but at the cost of draining his life energy. Aang would then go and say all of his goodbyes to his friends and family. Then the light spirit Rava would leave his body, and then the next avatar would be born. After Aang's death, a statue would be built in his honor right outside of Republic City, cementing his legacy forever.